you to close your eyes for a second, unless you're driving, obviously.
Yeah, please keep your eyes on the road if you're driving.
Right, safety first. But if you can, picture a timeline of human history. Start way back at the beginning, hundreds of thousands of years ago. You know, stone tools, fire, the whole 9 yards.
The classic evolutionary ascent.
Exactly. Now, if you were to plot the human population on a chart across that massive span of time, what does the line look like in your head?
I mean, I think most people visualize a ramp or maybe a steady, gentle climb up a mountain, just a slow, consistent accumulation of humanity leading right up to us.
Right, that's the intuitive assumption. We think of progress as a straight line up, but if you actually look at the data, that is not what historians or demographers see.
Not at all.
If they look back at us, at our specific time in history, they aren't going to see a curve. They're going to see a spike, a massive, sharp, razor-thin spike.
It is a genuinely startling image when you actually see it graphed out. Because for almost all human history, the population line is basically flat, just hugging the bottom of the chart.
Just scraping along.
Yeah, and then in the last 2 centuries, which is a blink of an eye geologically, it shoots straight up vertically. But the research suggests we are now standing at the very tip of that spear. We aren't in the middle of the climb anymore, we are likely at the peak.
And that is exactly what we're unpacking today. We're calling this the population paradox. We've pulled together a serious stack of research for this deep dive.
A lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, we're talking data from PLOS1, visualizations from Visual Capitalist, reports from the UN Economic Commission for Africa, plus papers from Drake University and the Institute for Family Studies.
And the picture these sources paint is of a world that is currently splitting in two. It's a true bifurcation.
We have some places seeing an absolute explosion of life, and others where the cradles are literally gathering dust.
And this isn't just about counting babies. This shifts the tectonic plates of the global economy, geopolitical power, and even what a major city looks like in 20 years.
But before we get to the map, we have to start with the most mind-bending stat from that PLOS1 research you brought to the table. I read this, I think, 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating.
I had a feeling this one would stick with you. It's what the researchers call the long view.
Lay it on us.
So the researchers modeled the long-term future of humanity. They calculated that throughout all of history, from the dawn of our species until today, about 120 billion humans have been born.
120 billion.
That is every distinct human life that has ever existed.
Oh, okay, that's the pass bucket.
Right. Now, here's the kicker. If fertility rates continue their current downward trend and stay low, which is what the data implies, their projections suggest that only about 26 billion more humans might ever be born.
Wait, ever, as in
Until the
sun burns out, until the species packs it up.
In that specific scenario, yes. We aren't just living in a crowded time. We might be living through the era that contains something like 80% of all humans who will ever exist. We are the peak.
That completely reframes how I think about the future. You usually think of the future as this infinite expanse of more.
The Star Trek expansion.
Exactly, more people, more cities settling the stars. But you're saying we might be looking at the downward slope.
We might be. And the mission of this deep dive is to understand the mechanics of that peak. Because while the global total is leveling off, the distribution is shifting radically.
The demographic divide.
Yes, creating 2 distinct realities on Earth right now. The baby boom and the baby bust.
Let's start with the boom, because I think people underestimate just how localized this is. We have a snapshot from Visual Capitalist looking at projections for the year 2025.
Which is literally around the corner.
Right. They mapped out where the babies are actually going to be born.
It's a fascinating map because it completely challenges the old East versus West narrative we grew up with.
So the global number is expected to be around 132 million babies born in 2025. But where's the crazy part? There is one specific comparison that jumped out at me. Nigeria.
Nigeria is becoming an absolute demographic titan.
It's more than a titan. In 2025, Nigeria alone is projected to have 7.6 million births. And that number by itself doesn't mean much until you compare it to all of Europe combined. Every country in Europe, Germany, France, the UK, Spain, Italy, all of them added together, only hit 6.3 million.
That really illustrates the shift in the center of gravity, doesn't it? one country outpacing an entire continent that used to be the center of world power.
It's staggering, and this brings us to the growth engine of the world right now, which is Africa.
We have a report here from the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the ECA. They released some heavy data on this trajectory.
Yeah, Africa's population crossed the 1.5 billion mark in 2024.
But the momentum is the critical part here. It is projected to hit 2.5 billion by 2050.
So just doing the math in my head, by 2050, 1 in 4 people on Earth will be African.
Correct. 1 in 4. That shifts everything. Culture, consumer markets, labor pools.
But we need to be careful not to oversimplify why this is happening.
Right. The common assumption is just, oh, people are having huge families.
Well, looking at the data, in places like Niger, the fertility rate is still about 6.49 children per woman, which is undeniably high.
It is high. But the ECA report highlights another factor that is arguably more important for this explosion. It's not just about birth, it's about survival.
You mean the mortality rates?
Precisely. In 1960, the infant mortality rate in Africa was 145 for 1,000 births. That is a tragic statistic. Nearly 15% of babies didn't make it.
It's heartbreaking.
But by 2024, it dropped to 38 per 1,000.
Wow, that is a massive victory for healthcare and development.
It is arguably the greatest success story of the last century. More babies are surviving, growing up, and having families of their own.
Which creates a compounding effect.
Exactly. And this leads to that economic concept that development economists get very excited about, the demographic dividend.
I see this term thrown around in financial news a lot, but let's break it down for the listener. It sounds like a stock market payout, but it's actually about age structures, right?
Think of it as a specific alignment of the stars. You have a massive generation of young people entering the workforce, aged roughly 20 to 64.
Okay.
At the same time, because fertility is starting to drop slightly, you have relatively fewer dependent children, and you don't have a huge elderly population yet.
So the ratio of makers to takers, if we can be that crude, is optimal.
It's the Goldilocks zone. You have a surplus of labor and fewer mouths to feed. If, and this is a massive if, you can provide education and jobs, that workforce can trigger explosive economic growth.
Like what happened in East Asia?
South Korea, Taiwan, the Asian tigers in the late 20th century, they rode that exact wave to prosperity.
But the flip side is the risk. The source mentions that if you have hundreds of millions of young people and no jobs,
then you don't get a dividend, you get a disaster. You get political unrest, migration crises, and instability. That is the high-stakes game Africa is playing right now. It's a race between population growth and job creation.
So that's the boom side of the equation. Now let's pivot to the bust, the shrinking world. We are looking at East Asia and Europe, the so-called super-aged societies.
This is the other side of the coin. Visual Capitalist highlights places like South Korea, Taiwan, Italy, and Spain. These are countries where the birth rate has collapsed to below 7 per 1,000 people.
The absolute numbers are striking. Germany, the UK, France, Japan, each of them is hovering under 750,000 births annually.
Japan is the one that really changes the paradigm.
It always shocks me because we grew up hearing about Tokyo as the ultimate, unending megacity.
Japan used to be a major contributor to global population growth. Now it is shrinking. And this changes the mental map we have of the world.
I saw that in the projections. We're used to thinking of Tokyo, New York, or Osaka as these eternal giants. But the data shows that by 2050, those cities will likely be shrinking.
The new megacities, the behemoths of the future, are going to be places like Dhaka in Bangladesh, Jakarta in Indonesia, and Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Kinshasa is a perfect example.
It represents that shift to the global south perfectly. The urban future is African and South Asian. If you want to know where the next big cultural trends or trillion-dollar markets are coming from, you need to look at Lagos and Kinshasa, not Paris and Tokyo.
Okay, so we have established where this is happening, but I want to get into the why. This is where the psychology comes in.
The mechanics of decline.
Exactly. Why are people in the developed world, and increasingly the developing world, stopping at one kid or having none at all?
It is complex, but we have some great research to guide us. First, let's look at the paper from Drake University. It tackles the relationship between education and fertility.
Now, the standard assumption is usually pretty simple. Women get educated, they get jobs, they get too busy for large families.
But the paper argues it's much more calculated than that.
Right, it introduces the quantity-quality trade-off.
It sounds like a cold economic calculation, and most parents wouldn't describe it that way over dinner, but it explains the behavior perfectly.
Break that down. What's the trade-off?
The theory is that as women gain access to education and the economy modernizes, the cost of success for a child goes up.
What do you mean by cost of success?
You realize that for your child to succeed in this new, complex world, they need more than just food and shelter. They need tutoring, university degrees, coding camps, extracurriculars.
So instead of having 5 kids and hoping for the best, you have 1 or 2 and pour every resource you have into them.
You're concentrating your capital. You choose quality of investment over quantity of offspring.
And the Drake paper notes this holds true across diverse cultures, from Pakistan to Colombia.
Even parents in developing nations who aren't highly educated themselves are starting to make this trade-off for their kids. They see the writing on the wall. The future requires high investment.
It's an investment strategy, but to make that investment, you need stability. And that brings us to the second big factor, money.
The wallet hit.
Specifically, the Institute for Family Studies, the IFS, published a paper about inflation and fertility in the U.S.
This one is fascinating because it distinguishes between things being expensive and actual uncertainty.
The wallet hit versus the head game.
Exactly. The paper looks at unexpected inflation. When inflation spikes unexpectedly, like we saw post-2020, it creates an uncertainty shock. It scrambles your ability to plan.
And the stat they found is clear. A 5 percentage point increase in unexpected inflation results in 15 to 25 fewer births per 1,000 women.
That is a significant drop just from price fluctuation.
It is, and crucially, it hits young women, those in their early 20s, the hardest.
They don't necessarily say, I never want kids. They say, not right now.
Because they can't predict what childcare or housing will cost next year.
Right. They don't know if their paycheck will cover diapers in 6 months, so they postpone.
And biology being what it is, if you postpone too long or if the right time never comes, the window closes.
Precisely. The data shows that during the period of stable inflation from 2004 to 2019, fertility in the U.S. was higher, around 1.94.
But post-2020, with high inflation, it dropped to 1.66.
People crave stability before they commit to a family. When the future looks foggy, people hit the brakes.
Okay, so we have the quality trade-off and economic uncertainty. But I want to zoom in on the most extreme case of this. We have to talk about South Korea.
We pulled a source from Think Global Health that really lays out the crisis there.
South Korea is the canary in the coal mine for global demography. Their fertility rate in 2023 was 0.72.
0.72.
Just to give you context, the replacement rate, the number you need just to keep the population steady, is 2.1.
They are at a third of that.
It is unprecedented in peacetime.
If that rate holds, the population structure inverts almost overnight. You have an inverted pyramid with a tiny base of young people supporting a massive top-heavy generation of retirees.
Why is it so extreme there? Is it just the inflation thing, or is there something cultural happening?
It's a perfect storm. You have the economic factors, housing in Seoul is incredibly expensive, but the Think Global Health article highlights the work culture.
Notoriously long hours.
It is physically difficult to be a present parent and a successful employee in that system.
But there's also a massive gender gap component, right?
Right.
I saw a stat in the report about housework that I had to double check because it seemed impossible.
The unpaid care work stat.
Yes. In South Korea, women do about 54 minutes of unpaid care work, so childcare, elder care, housework every single day.
And the men.
15 minutes.
That is a huge disparity. So think about the social deal here. If you are a South Korean woman, getting married and having a child often means taking on a massive second shift that your partner isn't sharing.
While also trying to maintain a career in a brutal work culture.
It makes the deal of marriage look pretty terrible. You're signing up for double the work.
It does. And this has sparked a serious backlash. The source mentions the 4B movement.
Right, this is the radical feminist movement. 4B stands for 4 no's.
No dating, no marriage, no sex with men, and no childbirth.
It's important to understand this isn't just postponing like we saw in the US inflation data. This is a strike, a rejection of the traditional path.
It's a vote of no confidence in the system.
Exactly. And it shows that this isn't just about money. It's about a rejection of a social contract that many women feel is fundamentally unfair.
But the government is trying to fix it, right? I read they're throwing cash at the problem. Baby bonuses.
They are desperate. They're offering monthly stipends of around $770.
But the expert insight from the article is pretty damning. Research shows these cash handouts have a negligible long-term effect.
You'd think free money would help. Who turns down $700 a month?
Well, the researchers found that 74% of that money went to births. That would have happened anyway.
People who are already planning to have kids took the money, naturally.
But it didn't convince people who weren't planning to.
That makes sense. If your career is going to derail and you're going to do all the housework, $700 a month isn't going to change your mind.
It's a drop in the bucket compared to the lifetime cost and stress.
Exactly. You can't buy your way out of a cultural problem. Real solutions require structural change, flexible work schedules, genuine gender equality in the home.
And those are much harder to legislate than writing a check.
So South Korea is facing this now, but the PLOS One paper suggests the whole world is eventually heading this way. This brings us to the long view, 2100 and beyond.
What does a shrinking world actually feel like to live in?
This is where we get into the dependency ratio nightmare.
Nightmare is a strong word for an academic paper.
Well, economically speaking, it is. If the world converges to a fertility rate of around 1.2, which is where East Asia is today, the ratio of old people to workers skyrockets.
How bad does it get?
We could see 6 times the number of older adults per worker compared to what we have now.
6 times? Imagine a tax base trying to support that.
It breaks the current model. Our pension systems, our healthcare systems, they are all built on a pyramid structure.
Lots of young workers at the bottom paying taxes to support the few retirees at the top.
If you flip that pyramid, the math stops working. It would require a complete reinventing of retirement and labor.
So can we turn it around? Is there a rebound scenario in the cards?
The researchers looked at that, and this brings us to a concept called path dependency.
Which means?
Basically, it matters when you fix the problem. You can't just wait until things get bad and then flip a switch.
Walk us through the scenarios.
So let's say fertility falls, but then we figure it out. We fix the work-life balance, the economy stabilizes, and fertility rebounds to replacement levels.
Okay.
If that happens in the year 2125, the global population stabilizes around 8 billion, a manageable, familiar number.
2125, that's 100 years from now. That feels like a long time to figure things out.
But if we wait just 50 more years until 2175 to fix fertility,
What happened?
the population doesn't stabilize at 8 billion. It stabilizes between 2 and 4 billion.
Whoa, that is a massive difference. You lose half the human race just by waiting 50 years.
Because of the compound effect of smaller generations. If you have a small generation, they produce an even smaller next generation. It spirals down.
Those few decades of delay represent a permanent loss of billions of people in the stable state.
Once you go down the curve, it is very hard to climb back up to the same height.
It's like losing altitude in a plane. You can pull up, but if you wait too long to pull back on the stick, you're going to be cruising at a much lower level forever.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And a world with 2 to 4 billion people is a very different world.
It's smaller, perhaps quieter, less strain on the environment potentially, but also less dynamic.
Less innovation, smaller markets, fewer geniuses being born to solve the next set of problems.
It implies a less vibrant civilization.
It certainly implies a slower one.
So to wrap this up, we are looking at a bifurcated world. Africa is the engine driving us to a peak, creating a new center of gravity.
Meanwhile, the developed world, and increasingly places like South Korea and China, are shrinking fast.
And the causes are deep. It's not just a cycle. It's education, it's economic shocks like inflation, and it's a fundamental mismatch in gender equity.
These aren't things you can fix with a coupon for a free stroller.
It really makes you think about that spike visualization from the beginning. We assume we are the norm. We assume 8 billion people is just how Earth is supposed to be.
We do. And I want to leave you with one final thought from that PLOS One study that really encapsulates this. We take it for granted that the world has billions of people. It feels like the natural state of things.
It's all we've ever known.
But if we don't rebound, if we settle into that lower stable state, the period where Earth had more than 2 billion people might just be a 400-year span in total.
400 years. In the grand scheme of human history, 200,000 years, that's nothing.
A blip. A brief, crowded moment in time, we might be the anomaly. The question is, are we prepared for a world that gets smaller forever?
That is something to chew on. A blip in history. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the future of us. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share.